And good morning, everybody. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. It is Friday morning, the 15th of September, 2023. Good old 710 KNUS. As the man said, 65, a little bit colder this morning, but Saturday and Sunday looks pretty good. 77 Saturday, Sunday 83, and back to work Monday, 82 degrees. It is good to have everyone here, and good morning. I have come across this and spent my entire week reading online on how many people have followed this because this got a played down story. And Billy Thorpe and I spent a lot of time yesterday afternoon and again this morning talking about doing this as a show. And you may or may not know the story, but a Secret Service agent who was literally feet away from former President Kennedy when he was assassinated is now raising new questions about what was called the magic bullet theory. The guy's name is Paul Landis, and he was one of the agents with Kennedy during that parade in Dallas. And he comes forward now to tell his version, I guess that's the best way to say it, of the assassination. And he was in the New York Times, and he's an upcoming book. Now, I've not been able to find the book to physically get my hands on it. I don't think it's dropped yet. But I have been able to read for the last couple of days quite a bit on the internet, and as we always talk about, seemingly in these obscure places. Now, after decades of trying to ease that day from his memory, and I've read him, and I totally take him at his word. He said his recollections, if his recollections are correct, the magic bullet theory. Now, people will say, what is the magic bullet theory? First of all, 303-696-1971. I want people to tell us how they feel about this story because it means so much. And of all of us working on the job this morning, I think probably Tommy and myself, Billy wasn't alive. Mark was, how old Mark must have been, Mark Crowley. But during this stuff, and remember when Jack Kennedy, one of the theories that remained the focus of this intense debate was the single bullet theory. And this theory was supported by the 64 findings of the Warren Commission. Now, mind you, I'm a total geek about the Warren Commission being an enormous lie and also being the jumping off place from this moment in Dealey Plaza until, well, actually, I take it to the invasion of Iraq. I would take it now to what Bush and Cheney did. The Warren Commission is about as honest as the 9/11 Commission when it came to Bush and Cheney. But the theory, 1964, the Warren Commission comes out investigating Kennedy's assassination. And they say the president was shot by the same bullet that injured or shot Texas Governor John Connally. Now, remember, Connally is in the front seat of the limousine, and they called that the magic bullet theory. And the, 900 pages, the Warren Commission, and Robert Kennedy, JFK's brother, who, of course, goes on himself to be murdered. Now his son is getting the attention. And he said they just spoke openly their doubts about how shoddy the Warren Commission report really is and was. But according to the single bullet theory, the president's motorcade makes its way past the Texas Book Depository in Dallas. Here's Lee Harvey Oswald. He has a mail order rifle, takes aim at Kennedy's head, 6 stories below with a single shot. 6.5 millimeter bullet pierces Kennedy's suit coat from the rear, puncturing his body to the right of his spine. The bullet exits Kennedy's body through the front of his neck below his Adam's apple and goes on to do what? To hit John Connally. And so this path of travel is very unlikely. I know some people that know an awful lot about this kind of thing becomes the single bullet theory, the magic bullet. So after decades, says this former Secret Service guy, He said the so-called magic bullet theory is time to be debunked. 303-696-1971. Do you consider this significant, or is this just me thinking it's significant? And that's important. The magic bullet theory was put forward by the Warren Commission report the year after Kennedy's assassination. Now, remember, we've talked an awful lot. A lot of stuff has been written about Lyndon Johnson putting the commission together, cobbling this together with people who hated each other, didn't want to be in a room together. So the commission concludes, as we were saying, that one of the bullets fired at Kennedy's limo strikes the president and then hits John Connally multiple places. Now, investigators come up with this single bullet theory, and in part due to finding the bullet on a stretcher, this is where it gets good, on the stretcher of Connally at the Parkland Memorial Hospital. When this breaks, and again, I geek this stuff, I've spent my afternoons now reading it and going back and reading other things, knowing I was going to have George's show. And of course, tomorrow we're back on at 9:00. Tomorrow we got a really good, there's a new one on Top 40 Radio, and I love this stuff, and it's perfect for Saturdays. So investigators come up with a single bullet theory, finding the bullet on the stretcher of Connally and Parkland. Now, the New York Times piece that I read, Landis is 88 years of age, and he told the Times the theory doesn't match what he saw on that terrible day, 22nd November of 63. He said he found the bullet. 303-696-1971. Jump into this anytime you want. Instead of at the hospital, Landis said he picked the bullet up on the limo seat where Jack Kennedy was sitting. He goes on to say in the article, in a couple of other articles, there's nobody there to secure the scene, and it was a big, big bother to me. Now, I read another piece. Let me change things back around with apologies. He's in 1959, at the age of 54, at the age of 24, Landis joins the United States Secret Service, and he was assigned to a detail in Gettysburg watching over Dwight Eisenhower's grandchildren. And they call it the Kitty Detail. Now, again, I've not read the book, but there's parts of this book that are turning up lots of places on the internet. In 61, he's sent to Washington to serve what they call the Kitty Detail in the Kennedy White House because he had been dealing with Ike's grandkids. So he's assigned to this detail watching over Caroline, I should say, and John F. Kennedy Jr. 1962, Clint Hill. Wow, there was a name. Secret Service agent Clint Hill was assigned to Jackie Kennedy. And so Clint Hill asked Landis, said Hill had been protecting the First Lady by himself for 5 months and he needed help. It was right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And he goes on to say, this is another article that I read, that it was all part of the way the Secret Service was training at the time, mostly on-the-job training. He said, I'd been in the Secret Service school, and it was a treasury school, and we practiced motorcades, but this was different. It was the real thing. So Landis was among the Secret Service agents in the car behind the presidential limousine. Again, because I never knew any of this stuff, they called that car the halfback. Remember, they gave names to things. So the limo that carries more agents, or the car that carries more agents, is called the halfback. And he said, and this is, I quote him, he hears the first shot. And he said, I immediately turned to the sound. It came over my right shoulder, and then quickly turned to look at the president's limo and didn't realize that he had been hit. Going back to another piece that he does, he said, the investigators came up with a single bullet theory, partly due to finding the bullet on the stretcher of Connally and Parkland. Now, in his Times piece, and again, he's 88 years of age now, He said the theory doesn't match what he saw. Instead of at the hospital, Landis said he picked up the bullet from the limo's front seat. You ever see a picture of that bullet? It's hardly damaged. If it passed through all these people, it's and I don't know much about ballistics, but it would be pretty well snubbed up. And he said, is there nobody there to secure the scene? He said, it was this big bother. And he said, so all this is going on very quickly. I was afraid that, and this is a piece of evidence, and I realized it right away, very important, and I didn't want it to disappear or get lost. So, Paul, you've got to make a decision, he says to himself, and I grabbed it. Landis goes on to say he believed the bullet he found hit Kennedy in the back, but not deeply, and that resulted in the bullet coming out before the president was removed from the limo. He said the Times reported that this has made him wonder if the second shooter was there in addition to Lee Harvey Oswald. In the years since Kennedy's assassination, again, I'm reading this again, the National Archives has released numerous troves of documents from the day people have speculated whether Oswald acted alone. There's been no smoking gun in documents since the assassination. Now this one, historians and experts say Landis's account does not line up with the official version of that day. Even assuming that he was accurately describing what happened with the bullet. Now, who do they turn to? Gerald Posner. Posner's a bilker. And he wrote a book about this, and I read the book and had him on a radio show. He later turned up to be, he was the guy that bilked Harper Lee and her sister for money. It might mean nothing more than now that we know the bullet came out of John Conley. It's such a crazy story. Goes on to say, it's kind of hard to describe everything that happened in seconds. We arrived at the hospital, Landis said. The presidential limo, Mrs. Kennedy, she's holding the head of her fatally injured husband. Agent Hill throws a suit coat over President Kennedy's head. And he said, he looks and he said, I picked it up. I looked at it. It's a fully intact bullet. No real damage. Have you seen the pictures of the bullet? He said, I started to put it back, and then people were coming to the car. And again, this is excerpts from the book. And he said, I saw no Secret Service agents or anyone to the rear. I was afraid of a photographer, a souvenir hunter, somebody's going to pick this up, and I didn't want it to get lost. He said he put it in his pocket. I mean, this is totally, it isn't the official version. Landis said that he was swept into the hospital along with a large group of people. He said, we barged through the emergency doors, and again, I'm reading this. People were racing around everywhere. I was kind of surprised there were so many people. Governor John Conley, and they had taken Conley's body through another set of doors before us, and we were in a car. I didn't realize at first that John Conley had been wounded. Landis, the First Lady, and others go with Jack Kennedy's body to the trauma room. He said, I moved in. Mrs. Kennedy had been at my side, Clint Hill on the other side. Mrs. Kennedy was right behind the gurney. I got pushed into a mass up against an exam table. He said they brought him in the gurney. This is the body of the President of the United States. Landis said in this chaos, he remembers he has the bullet. He believes it's important and people needed to know it. And again, I quote him, he said, I'm not so sure how long I was in the room, not very long. The doctor, everyone's screaming and yelling. Doctors were asking everybody to please leave, and the doctors were trying to come in at the same time. Finally, the crowd starts to exit. I'm standing there. What do I do? What do I do? I got this bullet. maybe it's the best place to leave it. And he said, there's the president's body. They're going to perform an autopsy. They have a piece of evidence here. So I took the bullet out of my pocket, laid it on. He said, I was right next to the president's feet. And I put it next to his shoe. And immediately it started to roll off. And there was a trough around the exam table. Landis said, and he said he grabbed the bullet before it got lost in the drain from the trough around the exam table and placed it on the fold of the sheet. Landis says he's never read the Warren Commission report. And he's not amongst, he said it's not among more than 500 witnesses. He was never called as a witness to the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission convinced the bullet was discovered on the gurney on which was wheeled John Connally, concluded this bullet's pristine. The first shot that hit Jack Kennedy, passing through his neck into the back of Governor Connally, was sitting in the jump seat in front of the president. The commission says that it was, this magic, and again gets dubbed the magic bullet theory. They theorized that the bullet then fractured one of the governor's ribs and passes and shatters and the rest of it. Landis said it wasn't until decades later, when he was handed a book and he read about the Kennedy assassination, he realized the pristine bullet, the Warren Commission Exhibit 399, that the Warren Commission said they believe causes all the damage, is the one that he actually found. Warren Commission uses ballistic reports. Landis now says there's no way a bullet fired from behind and above that passed through the president, seriously injured the governor, could have ended up on the top of the back seat. Now, I think this is a huge story, and it's just, I think it speaks probably more to me. But I got a couple of things are coming in on the wall. Come on, Peter, learn how to make this thing work. Don't give me time off. You have to be retrained. I'm going to see, maybe it's this one that makes it work. Yeah, this one makes it work. Is it feasible a bullet shot from a rifle was found lying around? No. I mean, I'm no expert. Landis said there's no way that bullet was fired from behind and above, passing through the president. So he said he waited 6 decades to tell the story because, in part, he didn't know why the Warren Commission concluded about how they concluded about the bullet. And he said he simply wanted to set the record straight. Everybody, he said, I think everybody, the mistakes and not telling the truth. So I think this is a significant moment. 303-696-1971. I know there's sort of everyday talk radio topics that wear me out. But if the Warren Commission is not true, and we know the history of the Warren Commission where they cobbled this thing together, we know Lyndon Johnson wanted to place the blame solely on Lee Harvey Oswald, and everything stops. And the thing that strikes me, Billy, you tell me when we break because I don't follow the format. Anytime, okay. Everything stops. All the stuff about Cuba, everything just stops. What begins? Vietnam. What begins? All kinds of things internally in this country. It's all over. But the magic bullet, even more magical than we ever knew. And the JFK assassination witness offers these new details that really undermine the magic bullet theory and show the Warren Commission report not to be true. What do you do with it? The findings of the commission. None of that's true. That's the jumping off place that I think ends up, of course, through Richard Nixon, through Lyndon Johnson. I think now Bush and Cheney. I think it's just as you know, the deep state, people perhaps call it. But what happened? All right, 65 will be the high. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS. The lines are open, 303-696-1971. Do you have thoughts on this? Because I understand, it's much in the past, but it has such, in its final conclusion, the Warren Commission said they had all the evidence that the single bullet caused President Kennedy's throat wound, all the wounds found in Governor Conley. It's acknowledged that there's, this is the bullet. And the guy said, I found it, and I put it on the stretcher. I'm back here tomorrow morning, 9 to noon, Top 40 Radio. The guys from MC1 are going to be on. It is a Friday. It's going to be colder today. 65 is the high tonight and 77 tomorrow. What do you do with this story? 303-696-1971. Billy Tharp's got the con. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. When this came down, it was Tuesday. And I've nonstop spent my time in the afternoon reading this story. 1962, this young man. And now he's an old man that says, you got to know the truth. Everybody's calls, I hope they're there. 65, everyone stay here. I'm Peter Boyles. This is Radio Free Denver, good old 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcbjr.com. Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain first-hand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com.
Morning, everybody. Peter Boyles on a Friday morning, the 15th of September, 2023, 65 the high. It's going to be cool outside. We got a little bit of rain, 77 Saturday. I'm back here tomorrow morning at 9, talking about Top 40 radio tomorrow when Top 40 really did the job. This morning, I've been drawn to this, and it doesn't get attention. I, like so many people, have followed so much of the Warren Commission, the murder of John Kennedy, the assassination, if you would, the hit. But finally, I shouldn't say finally, because so many things have happened since that terrible day, but a former Secret Service agent who's now in his late 80s has come forward, and he said he wants to ease that day from his memory. The so-called magic bullet theory has been debunked. We'll start with Eric, 303-696-1971. How significant do you think this moment is, or is it a nothing burger? Eric, you're on the show.
Good morning, Peter.
Hey, man.
My belief is the CIA was behind everything. Kennedy did not want to go into Vietnam, wanted to dissolve the CIA, and they conspired, used the mafia to take Kennedy out.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a man named James Boyles last year who claims to be the person that fired the headshot. Showed me exactly where he fired it from. He's written a book that is fascinating. It has been supported by several outside entities, and that's my belief on this.
And the problem with the amount of people that, and again, there was a line that Dr. Franklin came up with, and Benjamin Franklin said, 3 can keep a secret if 2 of them are dead. and it's a motto of a young man's Christian organization that I'm familiar with. And in its conclusion, and this is why I think this is important, the Warren Commission said the single bullet causes John Kennedy's throat wound, all the wounds found in Governor Conley, and is Mark Crowley, who's a former cop, and we were talking out in the hallway during the pause, and they find this pristine bullet that the Warren Commission hangs its hat on. Now this man comes forward and says, I found the bullet. And he's a Secret Service guy. And he said, no, to me, it's like it erases all of that in a split second. But then look what happens, look what happens, look what happens, look what happens, look what happens. And that's why I think this is a really important story, and it doesn't get attention. The book isn't, or at least I can't get my hands on the book, which means nothing. But the Warren Commission came up with the single bullet theory in part due to, they say they found the bullet on the stretcher of Conley at the Parkland Memorial Hospital. And Landis, who's now 88, said, hey, I put the bullet there. And now what do you do with that? Your turn.
What I have heard, the 3 casings that were found up on the 6th floor were full metal jackets, which would have been a bullet intact per se, but the bullet that hit Kennedy in the head, there was no way it was, because they found a doctor testified at the Parkland that he saw numerous bullet fragments inside Kennedy's brain area. And that would not happen with the type of bullet that supposedly was fired from the 6th floor. Well, so that to me supports the big conspiracy.
Yeah, again, if say, let's suppose for a moment, and I do suppose it, that the Warren Commission is simply a cover-up. From that point on, if you think about U.S. foreign policy, the role of multinational corporations, and Jack Kennedy is a flawed, as we all are, and I'm more flawed than anybody else, but Jack Kennedy is a flawed man. And yet from that moment on, everything stops. And Lyndon Johnson begins. And the troop levels in Southeast Asia skyrocket, all the craziness, what goes on in civil rights struggles. And it goes into Nixon, who is a liar. Lyndon Johnson is a liar. The Pentagon Papers prove what a liar Johnson is. But the magic bullet is now even more magical than we thought before. No, I'm serious. I mean, it's like, I've been floored by this every afternoon when they called me and said, hey, man, you want to do the George show? And I said, you bet. And I brought all my papers in, and I'm thinking, is this just me? Because if this is what I believe, this just destroys, the beginning of the 60s. And most people say the 60s don't begin until 63 when John Kennedy's killed. That's the beginning of the 60s as we think of them. But this idea that the commission says they have all the evidence that the single bullet that causes Kennedy's throat wound and all these other things, and this guy says no. He said, I found it. And on the seat, it wasn't in Conley. I found the bullet. And they come up and say, oh, that bullet was here's Jack Kennedy and John Conley. They say suffered 8 wounds, all total 8 wounds, both of them from this one bullet. You ever watch the Zapruder film?
Yes, sir.
Well, Zapruder shows that too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men for Oswald to have fired them. And, they call it reacquiring your target and firing again. So the single bullet theory neatly solves both of the problems for the Warren Commission. 7 other non-fatal wounds sustained by both men. So if you have the single, because the Zapruder film showed that too little time had elapsed between, which shows you I really got to get a life, but that the amount of time Oswald could have not done it. We got the single bullet. The single bullet did all of this, and it's pristine. And this former secret, first of all, let me ask you, do you believe the Secret Service agent is telling the truth?
I would believe him, yes.
I do too.
Yes. Mr. Files told me that the distance he fired to where Kennedy got hit was approximately 88 feet. He said it was an easy shot. He had a scope on a pistol-looking type rifle. He said he aimed for the eye and got the temple. That was his words to me. Well, Kennedy's brain matter, his skull matter,
he's gone.
Goes up and over to the back.
Yeah,
all over the trunk and all over Elm Street. So,
what's interesting in reading yesterday afternoon, of all the people, Arlen Specter is the person who's on the commission. And he came up with the single bullet theory was devised by Arlen Specter, who becomes a senator from Pennsylvania. And the theory is, it makes the Warren Commission work. Without the single bullet theory, the Warren Commission is totally falls apart. And they go 3 shots, including the one that missed. Oswald alters the course of history. Let me ask this before we pause. Is Oswald the single man who alters the course of history all by himself with a mail order rifle?
No, sir. Oh. He was a patsy, like he said to the police. Mr. Files said he likely wasn't even in the building when the shot was fired.
He was there. People saw him come down. I'm kind of a geek book reader about this stuff, but people saw him come down. I don't know, but this one, when I started reading this first part of the week, and I'm thinking it has such significance I've never believed the Warren Commission, but how important the Warren Commission is. And now here is this, I guess, at least in my mind, overwhelming evidence. This guy says, look, the magic bullet that was used by the Warren Commission report the year after Kennedy, remember 64, it comes, and the commission concludes that this bullet fired at Kennedy's limousine hits the president, then hits John Connally multiple places, 7 times, and lies there pristine. Here's this 88-year-old guy that does this interview that I read. He's got a book coming. And he said, look, I found that bullet.
Yeah, it hit 2 of Connally's bones and it ends up pristine.
Yeah, pristine. Single bullet theory. Without that theory, and when they take the Zapruder film, in addition to this home movie taken, he's a bystander, really, Abraham Zapruder, and there's too little time that had elapsed between the apparent shots to hit both of these guys. So Arlen Specter, of all people on the commission, he's the commission's lawyer, by the way. This is before he's running for office. So, what's his payoff? But so Specter is now the senior senator. Well, I actually take it all back. Specter was, but he was the commission's lawyer. And he comes up with the single bullet theory, which they all cheer. Because what does it do? It eliminates, neatly solves the problem of how do you match the Zapruder film up, and we have to have a single bullet theory. Wow. Thank you. I'll talk with you. 303-696-1971. There's 2 lines open, 1 line open from the wall. So the alternative to Oswald not reacquiring his target is that at least 2 people blocks away from each other with no communication, shot at virtually identical times. Seems unlikely. I agree. I mean, there's nothing that makes sense. The bullet was found, and now this guy comes forward and said, I found the bullet. And he's now 88 years of age. And he said he picked the bullet up not at the hospital, which is what the commission says, but he said he found it in the car. It is a Friday, 65 today, 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. Let's take your calls, because if this is what it now becomes, and it becomes a joke, if the commission is a joke, and of course, what stage does it set? Where does it lead you? Where do you go from here? Does it, you go through all of Lyndon Johnson, and then you end up with Richard Nixon? You end up with the Bushes? I mean, it's really a significant moment here. The magic bullet, even more magical than we knew. 303-696-1971. It is your turn. Morning, everybody. It is a Friday, the 15th of September, 2023. I'm Peter Boyles, in for the one and only George Brauchler, 65. The high today is going to be colder, 77 Saturday. I'm back here tomorrow. We're going to talk about top 40 radio. And on Sunday, it's 83 degrees. Tom Muller and I go back too many years together, but it's interesting. Mark Crowley was, I think, 6 when in 63 in November when Jack Kennedy was assassinated. Billy, of course, was not alive. You and I were.
Yeah.
And now it's come here. This story breaks Tuesday, and it gets little, if no, attention on this really totally debunking all this most significant theory of the Warren Commission, the single bullet theory, which we'll talk about. But how impactful, I mean, I believe that nothing was quite like that until 9/11.
As you say that, and I look back on that, I agree with you. Just surveying the years between, there was nothing that impacted as greatly as
for old guys like us.
Yeah, right. For us, I mean, there was Pearl Harbor and all that before us.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, and there were events that through historians or social historians say, if you ask people what they remember,
where they were,
and one of them was Harry Truman beating Dewey.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
VJ Day, VE Day, victory in Japan, victory in Europe. Not necessarily the atomic bomb, which you would think, but
you would think, but it ended. It was a great time because it ended the war.
It ended it, sure.
So,
but everybody our age, I think, like the other morning we were doing 9/11. Where were you when it happened? And now this, but it's. Actually, this book, and we'll play some things that now this guy's done some drops. The guy's name's Paul Landis, and he was one of the agents with the Kennedys during the parade in Dallas.
He was a Secret Service agent.
Yeah, he was in the backup car, which I didn't know until I read this. They called it a halfback.
Oh,
great choice of words.
Yeah,
and he's in the halfback, and Clint Hill. He sees Clint Hill. And he tells this version of the assassination, and I read it in the New York Times, and the book isn't out yet, so Mark's checking it. But after decades of, he said, trying to erase that day in his memory, and he said the so-called magic bullet theory, is not true, and that holds the entire commission together.
Yeah.
So what do you do with that?
Well, you wait and see what he had to say about it as an onlooker.
Oh.
I was 20 at that time. You were
same
20,
age.
Same age. And when I heard of the assassination, I was in a TV director's class in college, and so we had TV studios right there. And so I was able to watch the monitors, all the unfolding as the story unfolded about the shooting of the president.
Wasn't the same after that.
No, it really was not.
Yeah,
it really was not. And
it really wasn't the same. I mean, for guys like us, I mean, it was never going to be the same.
No.
And, him being Irish and all the ethnic stuff, boy, I mean, he was in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
You're doing well?
I am doing well.
We got folks on the phones. We'll do a turnaround here. We'll come back with it. Tom Muller, everybody. Also, Jay Lopez, Denver Police Department, will be with us at 7:30. But they've now debunked this. The whole Warren Commission falls apart. Peter Boyles for George Brauchler. Stay here.
I started to put it back, and then I hesitated for a moment because I had looked around when I had been scanning the back area. I saw no Secret Service agents there to secure the car, and we were getting ready to exit the limo, and I didn't want to leave the bullet there because I was afraid people were starting to converge towards the car. I thought a souvenir hunter, somebody might see that. I didn't want to have the press be taking pictures or doing anything like that.
That's the voice of Paul Landis, who at 1959, at the age of then of 24, he joins the United States Secret Service. And now he's talking, and they're debunking the Warren Commission as if. Good morning, everyone. It's a Friday morning. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. Back here tomorrow morning on our Saturday show at 9 o'clock. You heard the weather, but it's today's going to be an interesting day. 65 will be the high, and we'll see what happens tomorrow. And Sunday will look beautiful, and Monday looks beautiful. Tomorrow on the radio show, 9 to noon, we're going to do a start on a top 40 book. There's a book now talking about top 40 radio, which was a time. 303-696-1971. Off air has been some response. So this begins for me last week. And by the way, the book, Landis's book, will drop October the 10th. Mark Crowley's already worked to get us a copy of the book, and we can get him hopefully on the show. The JFK assassination. The significance of John Kennedy's murder hit assassination. And its echoes, and it echoes into today, into 2023. It echoes for all of these years because you alter the course of history. And that moment, November the 22nd of 63, history is then altered, changed. And it hangs on something. And for those of us who went through it or drawn to it, and I want to know what you think, comes the Warren Commission. And we know from now all the different Carnot's books and all the different things that have come out, how Lyndon Johnson, with the help of J. Edgar Hoover, they're both they were very good friends. They were close. They were both untrustworthy men, but they were close. Now the Kennedys and Hoover, it's a different story. And they want to cobble together a commission that they called the Warren Commission, named after Earl Warren, who was a Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. And they put these different people on this commission. And in 1964, the commission publishes. And what does the commission say? Well, in essence, the commission finds that this man acts alone, that Lee Harvey Oswald acts alone. And the reason they say is the commission finds that they needed to find Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone. But now this man comes forward. And he said the magic bullet theory, and it's important. And again, I know we're off into the weeds on this, but if this commission report is as fraudulent as I believe, what it leads to, what comes next with Lyndon Johnson, what comes next with Richard Nixon. We were just talking when Daniel Ellsberg died, and I actually met Daniel Ellsberg. And he, again, the Pentagon Papers and Daniel Ellsberg. What does he say? Lyndon Johnson is not only lying to the American people, he's lying to Congress. He's totally capable of that. Who comes next? Richard Nixon. Would those men have been in those jobs if all of this hadn't happened? And was Jack Kennedy killed not by this guy who had gone to in the Soviet Union and come back and was this disgruntled former Marine, Well, there are other things that were going on. Well, so this fellow now comes forward, and it starts out, he's a young guy, and I've been able to, on the different media outlets, I've not read the book, but it's unavailable, but he's been talking. By the way, 303-696-1971. So in 1959, at the age of 24, Paul Landis joins the Secret Service, and his first detail is to go to Gettysburg, to Eisenhower's farm, and watch the Eisenhower grandchildren. 61, he's sent to Washington to serve on, they call the Kitty Detail again, the Kennedy White House, and he's assigned to the detail watching over Caroline and John. And 62, Clint Hill is assigned, and there's a guy on that terrible day, and Clint Hill is assigned to Jacqueline Kennedy. And this is just from, I think, about 12 different websites, but it's all part of this, the way the Secret Service, he said, does training. He said Hill had been protecting their first lady by himself, and for 5 months, and he said he needed help. And it was right in the middle of the Cuban Missile Crisis, and another example of what happens next. And it's all part of the way, he said, the service does training. And he said, we practiced motorcades. And he said, so he's, and I didn't know this, the second car, Landis is amongst the Secret Service agents in the car behind the presidential limo, and they call it the halfback. And he's in that car, and he hears the shots. He said, he found him in quotes, I immediately turned to see where the sound came from over my right shoulder. And he goes on from, what he does next. But he said he comes to this moment, and this is the magic bullet. And the entire Warren Commission is held together by the magic bullet theory. And is it even more magical than we knew? And I'll just quote you. He said, they go to the hospital, Parkland. How many of us remember? And I quote him now from New York Times. He said it was kind of hard to describe everything that happened in 6 seconds, but then very quickly, whereas the second shot, and he said, I heard the third shot, and it sounded like it was coming from the right. And we were in an echo chamber there, and we had just zoomed under the overpass and raced to Parkland. We arrived at the hospital. Landis said he ran to the presidential limo because he's in the halfback. Here's Mrs. Kennedy. She's got the head of her husband and refuses to let go. And Clint Hill puts his suit coat over Kennedy's head. And so much of this stuff has been talked about. But he said he finds this bullet. He said, I picked it up, looked at it. It's fully intact, no real damage. He said, I started putting it back, and people were coming to the car, starting to emerge on the car. He said, I saw no Secret Service agents or anyone to the rear, and I was afraid a photographer, souvenir hunter, somebody's going to pick it up. So he ends up in the examining room, or in the ER. He said, we barged through the emergency doors, and again, I'm reading him. People are racing around everywhere. I was kind of surprised there were so many people. And here's John Connolly. Remember, John Connolly plays out in all of this. And they had taken John Connolly, he said, through before us. We're in the car. He said, I can't even realize at first that John Connolly had been wounded. Remember, this is the magic bullet. Landis and the First Lady and others were accompanying the president's body taken into the exam room, the trauma room. He said, I moved in. Mrs. Kennedy was at my side. Clint Hill was on the right. I was on the left. Mrs. Kennedy was right behind the gurney. We pushed into the emergency room. I managed to slip behind Mrs. Kennedy. And as soon as we entered the room, she stepped to her left, just inside the doorway. He said, I got pushed by the masses up against the exam table. And he said, and this was the exam table the president's body's on. He said, we had brought him in on a gurney, removing his body from the gurney to the exam table. And all of this is all going on at once. Landis goes on. In the chaos, he remembers he's got the bullet in his pocket. He said, he goes on, he said, I'm not sure how long. I was in the trauma room. The doctors, everybody was screaming and yelling. The doctors were asking everybody to please leave, and doctors were trying to come in at the same time. He said, the crowd started to exit, and I'm standing there. Again, I'm reading Landis. What to do? I got this bullet. Maybe this is the best place to leave it. That's the president's body. He said, they're going to do an autopsy. He said, they will have a piece of evidence. He said, so I took the bullet out of my pocket and I laid it next to the president's feet. I put it next to his shoe, and it immediately started to roll off. And there was a trough that was around the exam table. And he said he then grabs the bullet again. And before it gets lost in a drain, those are, they're blood drains, right? And he said he places it in the folds of the sheets. Landis went on in another interview that I read, and I got these notes, that he never read the Warren Commission report. Was not even brought before the commission. Think about this. He witnesses all this, and the commission, he's not even a witness. He said he becomes traumatized by the memory of watching the president being killed in front of him, and soon after leaves the Secret Service. The Warren Commission, convinced the bullet was on the gurney on which they wheeled John Conley, concludes that it's this pristine bullet that becomes the magic bullet. Now, little geek about all of this that I am, you remember the name Arlen Specter. Arlen Specter becomes a senator from Pennsylvania. So he's the attorney. He's the attorney for the Warren Commission. And the magic bullet is the brainchild, if you would, of Arlen Specter. And remember, there's 3 shots, including one that misses. But this is where it all really has big problems. The Zapruder film, and we've all watched that and talked about this bystander by the name of Abraham Zapruder. So when they start to time out Zapruder, this is why Zapruder is important. So, for example, because there's 2 victims in Dealey Plaza, John Kennedy and John Conley, and they had suffered 8 in all wounds. Both these guys, 8 in all wounds. Originally, it seemed as if more than 2 bullets from the supposed sniper's nest on top of the book depository. And in addition, so the home movie that's taken by Abraham Zapruder shows that too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired. And they call it reacquiring the target. So the single bullet theory neatly solves both problems. A single, nearly whole bullet that's pristine, later recovered, that caused 7 of the non-fatal wounds sustained by both men. The bullet is, they said, was the centerpiece of the Warren Commission. Here's this guy coming. I said, no, put it there. Here, let me read a couple things that have come in. Tell me how much time and money is spent by the government to keep things secret and hide the truth. With the absence of facts, we all have is speculation. Now, that's good. Let me find this next one here. JFK assassination was really one of the big this is really well said. One of the big catalysts for the craziness of the 60s, wasn't it? Yes, well, it changes everything. And so if this is a lie, and clearly the 9/11 Commission that won't even deal with the Saudi Arabians, or if they do, they suppress it. And again and again and again and again, the Pentagon Papers, when these things do leak out, and you sit there and now what do you do? So, I mean, like I said, big deal. I spent 3 afternoons this week reading this. And you can read it. There's a couple of different sites, and we've asked for the book. But what do you do with this? 303-696-1971. I told Billy Thorpe, I said, maybe it's nobody cares. And so I'm reading, all sentences begin with I'm reading. The impact of what happened to George Custer at the Little Bighorn. I was telling Billy this before the show kicked off. Of all the people in the world to read that, Yamamoto read it. Of the guy who plans the attack, leads the attack against the United States on December the 7th at Pearl Harbor. But he's a Warner, as you know. He had lived in America, had played cards and poker, and I think he had played poker with Halsey or Nimitz or one of those guys. They actually knew one another. So when he speaks to the Supreme Command, he brings up the Little Bighorn. And of all people, Yamamoto, he brings it up and he said, these people have resolve, because Little Bighorn and the death of Custer had the same impact as the 9/11 on the country. I didn't realize the tremendous impact that the Little Bighorn had. Now, I've really become like seeped in the Little Bighorn. And it causes, as Yamamoto can read history, he said, these people, and meaning us, he said, are full of resolve. So after Custer and his men are killed, it also ends it for the Lakota. It ends it for the Cheyenne. It ends for the Arapaho. That's it for the Plains Indians. Because when the United States comes back, they take away Indian Affairs and they give it to the War Department. And it's Phil Sheridan and it's all these people that just kill Indians. And it begins. And Yamamoto reads that and goes, hey, remember the great line, you have wakened the sleeping giant. Well, this moment and its conclusion, where the Warren Commission is just, the single bullet theory is a lie. And I've been geeking on this for so many years and reading about it, but again, the brainchild of former Warren Commission lawyer Arlen Specter. But if you can build the single bullet theory, it holds the entire commission together. There's 2 victims in Dealey Plaza, Jack Kennedy and John Conley. They suffered so many wounds, all from one bullet, 8 in all. And there's the sniper's nest in the book depository, and to explain all of this damage. And so they just assumed that Zapruder film never broke, but Zapruder shows that too little time has elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired. And if you've ever been a shooter, they're calling it reacquiring the target and firing again. So what do we got? Single bullet theory neatly solves both of those problems. And the single whole bullet, pristine bullet that they claim is recovered as the centerpiece, and now comes this man, Paul Landis. Now he's 88, he'll be 89 years of age. He said, I put that bullet there. Wow. Now, I want to, and like I said, I know I get to do this very rarely, and I know that talk radio is in another direction these days, But man, I think this is significant. 65 will be the high today, 77 tomorrow. Jay Lopez, Denver Police Department, part of MC1, will be with us at 7:30. The MC1 Honor Run goes on the 24th, and Jay will be with us, and we'll have more folks on. But as you know, the MC1 Honor Run, motorcycle fundraising ride benefiting the MC1 Foundation. And this year, by the way, the Denver Police Department Sergeant Justin Dodge is our guy. So, but this one, I think the magic bullet, and I was like, God, here's a line jammer, here's a packer, because if you understand what the commission did to this country, and what Lyndon Johnson does, and what Richard Nixon does, and I mean, leading into Bush and Cheney, what they do. And as I mentioned, the Pentagon Papers and what they show you, what these people have done. Wow. The magic bullet, even more magical than we knew. So I mean, maybe again, that what is important. And this casting doubt, if you would, on the Warren Commission. The Warren Commission uses all these ballistics to determine that firing of the bullet, and that Landis said that he found the bullet and on the back seat, and it matched a rifle. And he said he put the bullet in his pocket, dumps it on the stretcher. 303-696-1971. I'm stunned by this, and maybe it is like it's not that big of a deal. Maybe it's no BFD, but I think it's just an amazing thing and it isn't getting attention. And among all those Kennedy assassination controversies, there was nothing that on the commission that could support the single bullet theory. There was nothing. And now it was the brainchild, we now know, of Arlen Specter, who played the attorney. But who's involved? We know that John Edgar, kept things away. To the wall. I apologize if I'm being dull of mind this morning. No, you're not. Is it possible the bullet was planted there in advance in the vehicle? Yeah, I mean, everything's but the fact that the single bullet theory that neatly solves the problems for the commission I'm blown by this. So maybe it's more time to talk about something more important. 303-696-1971. I'm just taken back by it. All right. We'll turn around. We'll come back. We'll MC1 Honor Run. We'll have Jay Lopez with us from the Denver Police Department. Billy Thorpe's got the con. 65 will be the high today. Tomorrow, everything turns back. We'll do Top 40 Radio tomorrow, 9 to noon. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. Hold on. Here we go.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Morning, everybody. Peter Boyles for George Brauchler, who will be back on a Monday. We're here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock and part of Top 40 Radio, the history. It's a Friday morning. Thank you for being here. The 15th of September, and 65 will be the high, 77 on Saturday, 83 on Sunday. Coming up in 2014, the MC1 Foundation was started. The MC1 Honor Run, a fundraiser motorcycle ride for the family of Sergeant Dave Baldwin, the Jefferson County Sheriff's Office. And Sergeant Baldwin, whose radio call sign was MC1, was killed in the line of duty. He was struck on his motorcycle by a wrong-way driver. And that began the MC1 Foundation. And every year, the board selects a public service employee who had been injured, the line of duty, and the honor run benefits them. The foundation, 100% volunteer organization, and so many wonderful men and women I've met. So it goes again this Sunday, it goes next Sunday, September 24th, and it begins at Columbine High School. And he's kind of come on the show from Denver Police Department, Jay Lopez. Hey, man, thanks and good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning, Peter. How are you doing?
I'm good. It's one of those mornings where it's like, I think I got a good idea. Maybe I don't. Talk about yourself and how you got, what happened to you, and then about the MC1 Honor Run.
All right. Well, I've been working for the Denver Police Department since 2001. I've been a member of our fugitive unit for the last 16 years or so. And I was injured during the takedown of a homicide suspect. I was shot in the neck. It was just coming up on a year ago, the end of this month.
Where is that suspect now?
He was killed in the shootout.
I remember, for folks that may not remember this story, where did all of it take place, Jay?
It was up in Broomfield. Or Lafayette, like 120th and, or I'm sorry, 140th and like Wadsworth, I think it was.
How many?
Or Sheridan. I don't remember.
Did your wife laughing?
Yeah.
You don't even remember.
I don't know.
That's right. I don't. Do you remember much of it?
Yeah, no, I remember everything. I'm just a little nervous on the radio.
No, man, relax. Relax.
No, that's all right.
I tell you, if Mark Miller can do it, you can do it.
Yeah, no, he's such a good guy. But the MC1 Foundation stepped up for my family, and they've been there since I got out of the hospital. Actually, I've been in touch with them, and they've been amazing. And I can't tell you what it means to the officers when they're hurt and they know that they don't have to worry about they don't have to worry about finances. They can just focus on healing. And that's the important thing. And that's what MC1's all about.
It is interesting. It's going to begin. This is because of Frank DeAngelis, but it'll start at Columbine High School and the doors will open, but the parking lot will open at 8 o'clock. And you can register there at Columbine. 9:30, we have a ceremony that is so emotional every year. 10 o'clock, people say they call it Kickstands Up. And we end in this venue called the Main Event up on 144th Avenue in Thornton. And if you're riding, it's $40. If you're riding by yourself, passengers, if you're bringing someone with you, it's $50. And you can pre-register at the WWWMC1 Foundation. I've met so many great men and women, Jay, like yourself, and this year it's Justin Dodge. Do you know Justin at all? Because you guys are on the same.
Oh yeah,
team. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've worked with Justin for a long time.
Justin is our guy this year, and sadly, he was struck by that ladder truck on the 15th of June, the Denver Nuggets basketball championship celebration, and currently he's recovering from a leg amputation. And man, and things like this happen so quick.
Oh yeah. I've talked to Justin several times, and he's doing really well. He's a physical like workout maniac.
Yeah.
So I think he's gonna recover just fine from just about anything that happens to him.
He said he told Mark. I've never met the guy. I'll meet him on the 24th, but he wants back on the job.
Oh yeah, I think that's the thing about police officers is when they're injured, they work really hard to get back, and that's what I've been doing for the last year, trying to get back to work.
I was going to ask, what's the future? What's the prognosis?
For me, I don't know. My left arm is still, I don't have a lot of feeling other than nerve pain in my left arm. And I've got a surgery coming up next month that hopefully will tell me more about whether I'll be able to get back or not.
Are you going to be there on the Sunday, on the 24th? Do you have the opportunity to come down and be at MC1 when we kick it?
Yeah, they've asked me to be there, and I wouldn't miss it.
Well, let's do it. Yeah, let's be together that morning. And I mean, what happened
Absolutely.
to you? Yeah, so many great people that I've talked to, and one of the things that's really interesting is Crystal Baldwin, who was Dave's widow, and she rides her own motorcycle. And when this thing started, when Dave was killed, and Crystal will be there, and Frank DeAngelis will be there, and Jeff Schrader will be there, and there's such a list of men and women are coming. And every year the foundation selects a public service employee who's been injured. And this year, and I haven't met Justin Dodge, but I think he'll be there on the 24th. And I think, you things sort of run together, but that'll be cool to have you guys on the stage.
Yeah, we're looking forward to being there.
Yeah.
And coincidentally, I knew Dave Baldwin. He and I played softball together many, many years before I was a police officer. I knew him actually. So it was a strange coincidence.
Now, what a guy. And
he was a great guy.
When all of this really began it was called Emily's Parade for Emily Keys. And again, DeAngelis comes to the rescue, and we did that motorcycle ride for Emily Keys. And Dave Baldwin and Crystal, they were just bikers, and they came in their leather. And I didn't even know the guy was a Jefferson County sheriff but I knew him. Hey man, how and he would just be a helper. And then when Frank called and said that he had been killed on the highway, and I didn't know you guys knew each other.
Yeah, it's strange coincidence. I just happened to know him, and I'd wanted to be a police officer, so playing softball with a Jefferson County sheriff, I was excited to get to know him back then. So,
well, his widow, and she rides her own motorcycle. She'll be there, and she always speaks, and she's as tough as they come too. I don't know. Let's like I say, it's kind of donating to the MC1, and we'll get it off the ground. I'm really looking forward to being with you, and also with Dodge, and we can all stand on the stage with Frank and Mark Miller, and we'll take it from there. But Jay Lopez, everyone, Denver Police Department, and this year's honor run benefits. I interrupted you. Want to say something?
No, you're good. I just wanted to thank you for having me and the opportunity to talk about MC1. And how proud of the organization, and how proud I am to be even related to the organization. It's an honor.
Yeah, we have our final meeting is, I think, next Thursday night, and then Sunday's the run. And I talked to Mark yesterday, and Mark Miller has been like the best motorcycle rider, other than the guys that race Moto GT, these guys from Europe that get Mark is the all-time motorcycle rider. I mean, you ride with Mark, you're riding with somebody that can really ride. And I've told people the story, and he runs the school, and the final exam as they go to the top of Lookout Mountain facing into Golden, and they get on the bikes, and they're cop bikes, and they turn the ignition off, and you have to ride down. Without being.
Sounds like fun to me.
Oh, and they said, "You want to try it?" And I said, "Yeah, on your bike." not on mine.
Right.
And I'm looking forward to being with you. Jay, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on the show. I'll see you a week from
Thank
Sunday.
you.
Be safe. Thanks, man.
All right.
Thank
We'll
you
be
very
there.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Again. So now we're going to jump to the one and only, is it? Take a break first. And then Brian Gray joins us. And then people coming now, they're coming in to talk about this. Why do you think John Kennedy was killed? And do you believe the government taking it into the 9/11 Commission, the Pentagon Papers, the Warren Commission, they're called white papers, they're put out. And what is the purpose of them when you know that they're just factually not true? What does that do to you internally? It's a Friday. 65 will be the high. Right back after this. Others are talking and we're rocking. It's a Friday, September 15th. Peter Boyles in for George. He'll be back on Monday. Tomorrow, back at 9 to noon. We're going to do a couple hours on Top 40 Radio when that was the King of Swing. One more time, the lovely, the talented Brian Gray, Peter Boyles, Alpine Planning. my boy. Good morning.
I thought we told you to retire. What are you doing?
I can. I mean, because of you.
Hey, it's good to hear you this morning on the radio. Was not expecting it.
Yeah.
Got a little feedback coming, but don't know if you can hear it. Coming off a big rally yesterday, Pete. We got yesterday the Dow rose over 300 points, Nasdaq was up 100, and the S&P was up 37. But as we kick off today, everything's in the red. Dow's now down 56, Nasdaq's down 105, and the S&P's down 22. So we got a little bit of a sell-off, and I think part of that is due to the striking United Auto Workers. They've basically shut down 3 plants in Missouri, Michigan, and Ohio. This is the first time that 3 of the automakers have been shut down at the same time. So you kind of peel the onion back. What are the auto workers, what are they looking for? Better wages, better benefits, and job protection. You know, with everything going overseas or going south, that last one's pretty key, and that's the protection aspect of it. So we got a lot going on as we get ready to jump into the fourth quarter here, but if you need a portfolio checkup or you just want a second opinion on what you got going on, give us a call over here at Alpine Planning Group. Amy, Gabe, and myself, we'd love to sit down with you and see if we can be of help.
Used to be with the UAW that they took turns, that they would strike GM or then they would strike Ford or and the idea was we would get the leverage because if Ford isn't selling vehicles, then because we're striking, the GM is. And you're right. This is the first time that all 3 have walked at once.
You know, not to interrupt you there, Pete, but there's only about 14,000 right now that are out on strike, and they're hoping that they're going to build up some momentum and get even more people to walk out. So it's definitely going to affect the cost of cars, parts, repairs, the whole 9 yards.
The only unions that are in this country today that have any significance are public sector unions. And FDR warned the country, don't allow these, don't allow like teachers unions or public employees. Who do you strike against? You strike against the taxpayer. And with everything that's happened in the auto business in this country, you're right. I mean, it's a dangerous attempt because
it's gonna affect us. You know, it's not like we don't have enough going on with inflation and interest rates.
No, it's going to be
throw this into the kitty and away we go.
I wonder when they sat down and made the decision to strike. When I saw that, I've been reading about there's a couple of things but they were ginning up to do it all three together. And I forget who I was talking to. I said they never did that. They would do it Ford Motor Company, and then they do GM, and then they would do Chrysler. I mean, who's left in all of that right now? And so I don't know. Alpine Planning, this is the Peter Boyles stamp of approval. I can't tell you how important this man, Brian Gray, has been to me and to my family. Go with him, 303-843-0918, 303-843-0918. But Gabe is just a hoot. And I mean, they're just really good people. And because of Brian Gray, my family's in a very good place today because I listened to him. So listen to him. And believe me, he's forgot more than most people know about how to get ready to finally retire if you want to. 303-843-0918. Other than that, all's well?
All's good, and I'll see you next week.
Yeah, we're going to eat lunch. Yeah, we're going to have lunch today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll give you a call.
Thanks, boss. We'll see you.
All right. See you, Pete.
Bye. All right.
Securities and investment advisory services offered through Woodbury Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC and registered investment advisor. Alpine Planning Group and Woodbury Financial Services, Inc. are not affiliated entities. 14 West Dry Creek Circle, Littleton, Colorado, 80120.
All right, we're coming up on time. It's a Friday morning, 7:10 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. Back here tomorrow morning at 9. First part of this week, I saw this on a website that this fellow who had been a Secret Service and was in Dealey Plaza in the car behind the limo that the Kennedys were riding in. And now, after decades, he said the so-called magic bullet theory has been debunked. If this is true, and I tend to believe that it is, why do these things happen? And the debunking, the federal government lying to you, your thoughts. Coming up on a Friday morning, 65 is a high. Stay here.
With the crowd, I got just pushed into that room. I was right behind Mrs. Kennedy. When we were entering the room, I stepped behind her to keep her from getting pushed. And the crowd, she stepped to the side, to the left, just inside the doorway when we entered the trauma room. People were pushing and shoving, and I just got shoved right up against the examination table. And it just so happened I was right there next to the president's feet. People were coming in. It was chaos. And at that moment, I thought, well, this is the perfect place to leave the bullet. It should be with the president's body. It's an important piece of evidence. And this was the opportunity to leave it.
Morning, everybody. 710 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. We'll be back tomorrow morning at 9 doing the show. And we're going to do a couple of lengthy pieces on top 40 radio tomorrow on the show following Jimmy at 9. This one, I think, is such a significant moment. And it's a Secret Service agent who was, as you listen to him speak, just a few feet away from former President Kennedy when he was assassinated. And he raises new questions about the so-called magic bullet theory. 303-696-1971. What is significant about all of this, and I have, since the Kennedy assassination, I think it was the moment, at least for me, when it starts to be clearer and clearer and clearer that these people just simply lie. And they lie at the worst times. And the bookend for the Warren Commission is the 9/11 Commission report. We've talked many, many times about the role of George Bush and Dick Cheney and what they did. But it really kicks off as again, my birthday's next month, and I'll be an old guy. And brought Tommy in this morning, Tommy Muller, and we're same age guys. And we talked about the impact of this. And so when you doubt, when the truth is found to be lies, as Grace Slick said, something inside you dies. And as someone who really I'm drawn to what happened to John Kennedy and why. As much as I am to Lyndon Johnson, who follows, Richard Nixon, who follows, all of the great sadness and the loss of life, and how that eventually leads into a more recent time, what Bush and Cheney did, and how they took and made wars and then lied again. How significant is this at all to you? What I think, and again, maybe because is it a little bit too complex, which I'm being told by the wall saying it's complex, but it really isn't. When you think what this guy is now telling us, his name's Paul Landis, and he was an agent with the Kennedys. He was in the car behind the limo that John Kennedy is riding in with John Connally. And the magic bullet theory that was brought forward by the Warren Commission. And again, this week I've just been reading and rereading so many different parts of this. But does the name Arlen Specter mean anything? Well, of course, he becomes actually the senior senator from Pennsylvania eventually. But at the time of the Warren Commission, he was their lawyer. He was the senior lawyer. And he solves all of his problems by coming up with a theory that now the truth has come. And Landis said that he picked up the bullet and he took it into Parkland Hospital with him. So what's important, and again, how I see these things is they're in Dealey Plaza. President Kennedy and Governor John Connally had suffered so many wounds, 8 in all, originally from these 2 shots. The third doesn't go, as you know, the third shot misses. And if you're to believe the commission that Oswald had a sniper's nest, and so up pops this home movie. And the home movie is taken by this bystander, Abraham Zapruder. And the important part, and I think that the Warren Commission, and there's so much that they omitted and so many lies that were told. We know now the role J. Edgar Hoover plays, and just simply laying out, not telling the commission everything that they knew. And maybe even if they did, would the commission have used it? So if you take the home movie by Abraham Zapruder, and it shows that too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired. And if you've done any use of rifles, or something called reacquiring the target, because you get recoil, then you have to reacquire the target. So when you take the Zapruder film and you time it out, there's too little time elapses between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back, and they have to reacquire the target and fire again. But they come up with the single bullet theory that solves both problems. And it says, look, this whole bullet that's recovered causes 7 of the non-fatal wounds suffered by both of these guys. And it's pristine. The bullet was recovered, and they told you one way, which now obviously is not close to being true. Now, if you tie this into the Pentagon Papers, we mentioned Daniel Ellsberg and what the Nixon people did or attempted to do to Ellsberg. And again, they were trying to suppress all of this. These were the lies that were being told. It's Lyndon Johnson's lies, actually. But in the Nixon universe, Nixon knew Nixon's plans. They were telling lies about what they were going to do. And if those papers got out, which eventually they did, it wasn't they were going to discredit Richard Nixon. They were going to obviously discredit Richard Nixon's plans for what he was going to do, which was the lies that he was telling. Jump ahead, the 9/11 Commission report. They didn't want anything to do with it. They were Cheney, and I think Cheney's more in charge than George Bush. They did not want that commission put together. They wanted nothing to do with it. In fact, Cheney was opposed to the commission itself. And when it came time for George Bush to be in front of that commission, they had these conditions. Number 1, we will not be under oath. Number 2, you have to come to us in the White House. And number 3, we will only be interviewed sitting together. And in fact, Landis says he was never even brought before the Warren Commission. So what lessons? And, for me, when this started this week, and I'm reading every afternoon, I was excited to be able to bring this to George's show, because this is just, I think, so devastating. Landis is now 88, and Mark Crowley's ordered his book. We'll get him. And the first time I read him, they did a big piece in the New York Times, but he said that this theory does not match what he saw on November 22nd. He's the one to have found the bullet. He's in the car behind the limo. What does that do to you? Or does it do nothing? 303-696-1971. So, who kills John Kennedy and why? Do you believe the 9/11 Commission report? Did you ever wade through the Pentagon Papers? Did you ever even look at what these people are feeding you? And it should bring suspicion to almost anything that's staked out now. Here's the truth. No, it's not. Well, then what is it? Well, I don't know. I don't claim to know. But in its final conclusion, and I've read the Warren Commission, I read the published Warren Commission. There's lengthy Warren Commission. But they found evidence from the experts that the single bullet caused Jack Kennedy's throat wound, all the wounds found in Governor Conley, and it becomes the magic bullet. And here now, finally, and this is the great moment that this is, that the magic bullet theory is not true. It doesn't hold up. All right, to the wall. Isn't it ironic that every time there's been a Texan in the White House, we've been involved in some BS war? One's a Democrat, Lyndon Johnson, and the other one, of course, that's it. There's a tie. Yeah, but is George Bush? Someone said, "Is he really a Texan?" Lyndon Johnson certainly was. But I'm stunned by this stuff, and I've never believed it. And like so many other people, wanting not, or perhaps people just want to believe that this is all true and the single bullet did the job. And why does this matter? Well, it matters. It matters a lot. All right, let's go. Mike, you're on the radio show. Good morning. I'm Peter Boyles at 17 after the hour of 8 o'clock. Thank you.
Good morning, Peter. Long-time listener and retired Denver cop.
Oh, me.
And
Yeah.
we've met before, and I'm like you. I'm a geek about this. Been to Dealey Plaza 4 times. Read every book that's been written, and I believe CIA mafia were the ones responsible for this. With my reading. Yeah. But this whole thing with this bullet, I know he's an 88-year-old guy, but okay, I'm going to say as a retired cop, all right, I just want to play devil's advocate. Sure. So you find this bullet, okay, and you're law enforcement, you're Secret Service, so why would you put it in your pocket?
Don't know.
And then put it on the stretcher?
Don't know.
It's evidence. People. I
understand. I'm
really, because I know that the bullet was found and it's intact, and I truly believe there was multiple shooters. But I'm just, as a retired cop, I'm saying to this guy, it's kind of like when I read the book about painting houses, and the guy, because I believe the guy, but after listening to you and other people and all your mafia reading, that the guy didn't.
Oh, I don't think he did.
It was kind of a death thing, and
he explains it, and this is from the wall. Why did this gentleman wait so long to tell the story? Oftentimes these things happen where somebody is close to closing it out and they want to tell the truth. Now, you're right. The guy who wrote I Heard You Paint Houses, he was in the nursing home allegedly when he starts telling his stories. But and again,
because he also talked about the Kennedy assassination. Remember in the book that he took the 5 rifles to Dallas.
And he claimed it. He actually, the movie The Irishman that I've watched, it really isn't. It really isn't that book. That guy is. But
and then Hoffa's granddaughter said that you kill, or daughter, excuse me, who's a judge, you killed my father, you did.
Yeah.
And so I really believe the book, and I'm not disbelieving this guy. I'm just trying to wrap my mind around this. Peter,
well, something has to be able to, and I love this call because I've done this to myself all week. Something has to be able to explain the bullet itself, the magic
Right.
bullet. And if you look at the examples of, here's Jack Kennedy, here's John Connally, they suffered so many wounds, 8 in all, that that said they came where there was 2 bullets fired. The third one doesn't do anything, misses. And they say that Oswald builds, quote, a sniper's nest. It's in the report. But when you put it up against the Zapruder film, there's too little time that elapsed between the shots that hit both men. So the single bullet theory solves the problem. And so there's this pristine, nearly whole bullet that's been recovered, causes 7 of the non-fatal wounds sustained by both guys, and that bullet looks clean to me.
Well, and you look at the one book that the doctor that actually worked on Kennedy, young surgeon, and he says that that throat wound was an entrance wound. I mean,
absolutely.
he is the one that dissects it, and he looks at it, and he could tell that it's an entrance wound. And I mean, the theories, because people just roll their eyes when I start talking, but it's like, okay, we know Howard Hunt was there. We know some of the CIA guys of the Watergate thing were in Dallas.
Well, what do you, Mike?
I mean,
if you take this this is what I thought would be significant. If you take this as this jumping off place in 1960, actually the Warren Commission comes in 64, and you look at that stretch between that moment in Dealey Plaza all the way to anywhere, I don't care.
RFK, if you look at the murder of Martin Luther King,
all of it,
and you look at the involvement of the FBI in, because the people say, well, show me an evidence of the dark state. Well, look what they did to King. I mean, they sent tapes of it to his wife.
And that was Edgar Hoover, who, when it came to the Warren Commission, J. Edgar Hoover withheld the information. Remember the stuff that just came out about a year and a half ago, Oswald in Mexico? And that was suppressed.
That was suppressed. And then when you go look in history, you're going to see 2 men that are the most evil.
Hoover.
Maybe 3 is Hoover, Rumsfeld, and Cheney.
Well, you know what? Yeah.
These 3 men, Peter, changed things. But Hoover more than anybody, because Hoover blackmailed 4 presidents, and he would have been gone. And he definitely didn't like Kennedy.
He had the Kennedy. See, he hated Bobby. Bobby hated him. But no,
you're right. The greatest day of his life was to tell Bobby, your brother's dead. I mean,
called him back. Your brother's been shot. And the second phone call, your brother's dead, and he hung up on him.
Right, and then throws pictures of him and Judith Campbell on Kennedy's desk and on RFK's desk.
All right, here's one. You're taking an obscure name. Judith Exeter Campbell, who said she carried money and information back and forth between Sam Giancana and Jack Kennedy. Do you believe it?
Yes.
I do too.
And I truly believe that Kennedy, the older Kennedy, one of the things that caused his stroke, and that is he knew when his younger son went after the people that put Kennedy in office, it was over.
Yeah.
Because he'd made the deal to bring in West Virginia and Illinois for, all this talk about the stolen elections. That one, if you want to say a stolen election, if there is such a thing, all right, Kennedy was about as close as you can get.
And they had the Democratic Party in Cook County and West Virginia in the primary. They were Democrats, and no, they threw it. But when I want to give you the line, then I got a break. Come back with calls for. But go ahead. You say something if you want.
No, I just said I totally agree with you. This fascinates me, and I think people they don't pay attention because it's when America. You're so right. It's when it unravels. Because it all links together.
From that moment in 63 in Dealey Plaza. And, it's interesting, of the morning show team, there's only 2 of us that, were aware. I mean, Mark's a little kid and Billy's not even born yet. But the theories are thrown out the window. And that was a jumping off point, because now the war will begin. Now everything will jump off there at that point. The 60s don't really begin until Jack Kennedy's dead.
No, and I worked with Mark for years, and he and I are the same age. And it fascinates me. Yeah, if you look at the whole chain of events right through Nixon's resignation.
Oh man, and then on, and then it goes on and on.
Because now we're finding out about Vietnam.
Oh man,
and the contracts and Johnson, and I know you got to go, but I do one last thing is, if you look at Johnson's theories, is that Johnson wanted the war. I think Kennedy, my reading has said that Kennedy probably would have pulled out of Vietnam.
It's hard to know because he's dead, but that's the what if that you can't play. But they altered history on that terrible day. And now, I mean, I tend to believe this old guy that he had the bullet in his pocket, but that's,
It's just, I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. And the last statement is, I remember what Eisenhower told Kennedy, 3 things. Stay out of the Middle East. Don't go to Vietnam or you'll suffer like the French did. And there will be a military-industrial complex that will try to take a visual war.
And the other one on his deathbed is Douglas MacArthur says to a young John Kennedy, "A land war in Asia? ? No." And we'll talk. Mike, thanks. To the wall. What's even more mind-boggling is that the commission could convince the public that one single bullet could do all that damage. And that's why this is so important. All right. A turnaround Friday morning, September 15th, 2023. I'm Peter Boyles. It's kind of cold outside and it's wet. Tomorrow, everything changes. Tomorrow, back on the radio show at 9:00. And I follow Jimmy, but we're going to talk about one top 40 radio. And I love stuff like that. But this morning, it's this magic bullet. And this old Secret Service agent says, I put it there. 710 KNUS.
Why should you buy your next vehicle at Castle Rock Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram? We make car shopping easy. We have a huge inventory of new and pre-owned vehicles. We can even custom order. We make it easy. Easy financing, friendly staff. And when it comes to quality service, our expert technicians keep your vehicle in top shape. Visit us today off of Highway 25 and Plum Creek, or shop online at castlerockcdjr.com. Castle Rock, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram. Car shopping made easy.
Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the Holy Land, surrounded by like-minded travelers. Picture yourself stepping foot in iconic locations right out of history. With nationally syndicated radio hosts Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher, you'll gain firsthand understanding of the spiritual and political importance of this vital region.
Hi, it's Mike Gallagher here. I hope you'll join Dennis Prager and me on an amazing journey through Israel in October 2023.
Discover Israel's vibrant culture and why this nation is such a strategic partner for the United States. Join Dennis Prager and Mike Gallagher on this life-enriching Israel tour, October 25th through November 3rd, 2023. For more information, call 855-565-5519 or visit standwithisraeltour.com. Imagine the lifelong impact of a journey to the whole.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Morning, everyone, on a Friday, September 15th, 2023. Peter Boyles in for George. George back on Monday. We're here tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock talking about Top 40 Radio. What a time that was. We have one line open, 303-696-1971. It's wet outside, but boy, the weekend looks great. We're talking about this new book in an interview that I've read bits and pieces of different places, but after decades of the Warren Commission, which leads us into so many different things, the magic bullet. And it's obviously not true. Tom, you waited. Good morning. You're on the show, man. Thank you.
Good morning, Peter. First thing, how was your interview with Roger Bourget? Was it pretty good?
I love Roger Bourget. We've been friends for the longest time. We did not do an interview.
Okay.
I've done him in the past. I've done television with him in the past.
Okay, I thought you were doing one with him. I had just sold my
No.
Bourget a couple years ago. So
What model did you have?
I had a Fat Daddy. So
This guy,
yeah.
so the listeners get an idea if they don't know, was a genius. And he, had went as far as high school, and he did things with choppers. He put oil into frames. He put fat tires on the back. I've been to Sturgis with him. I went to Daytona Beach with him. He is.
He's something else.
He's brilliant.
Okay.
He's brilliant. But
Great.
go
Okay.
ahead.
Well, listen, to get back onto the single bullet, the forensics still shows true that it was one bullet. I mean, when you see how Governor Connolly was seated in a lower seat down to the center,
It was in a jump
and when
seat.
you look at the trajectory and you see how that seat was set up for a rifleman or for a Marine to hit John Kennedy the way he did, I mean, you're looking at rapid fire with a scope. And even though it's a bolt action rifle, the time frame works. And that bullet, the way it hits Kennedy and travels because of where Connolly sits, a lot of people don't talk about that, but the seat was, I think, it's been a long time, but I think it's 3 or 4 inches lower. So the president could sit higher. And so the trajectory of the bullet will travel through, ricochet, and go in that path. It doesn't stop and twist. It doesn't do anything. It travels through, and the way it hits Kennedy, travels through Kennedy, hits Connolly, then through the wrist and back into the thigh, makes complete sense. And I've looked at it, and I've watched the documentaries, and I've seen recreations of shooters time and time again recreate that same sequence.
Two things. One is the rifle itself is highly suspect. Two is Oswald was not that good of a shot when he was
He was a good shot. He actually was a good shot. And a lot of people reported that he was not a good shot, and his rifleman quality out of the Marine Corps was pretty good. So, you hand a rifle to a Marine, they're pretty good at what they do. They're trained to do it.
Well, that's for another discussion. But
sure,
most critics believe, and I think this is why this Secret Service guy is important, or former Secret Service, the single bullet theory is essential to the Warren Commission's conclusion that Oswald acts alone. And as the commission finds, Jack Kennedy was wounded sometime between, and if you look at the Zapruder film, which I think, with respect again to your position, but they would have just as soon not ever seen the Zapruder film, because the Zapruder film shows that too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men for Oswald, and there's this thing from firing rifles, reacquiring the target, and because the guns buck, and then firing again. The single bullet theory solves the problem. And now this guy, do you believe the Secret Service, former Secret Service guy said, I found the bullet, I had the bullet in my pocket.
And that bullet is undamaged, right?
Absolutely. Well, yes.
And why is it there? That's beyond me. All I can say is I'm speaking into the forensics of the shot and the forensics of a Marine with a rifle shooting that many times, and how he hit them. It's perfectly doable. Happens all the time. And so, I mean, when guys spend time, and honestly, Peter, I believe that the Russians killed him. I think that they were after Jack Kennedy, and this was the height of the Cold War.
They're
and
making
I think that was
the two of
that
them.
was them.
The two of them. Remember, Khrushchev is going to be after Kennedy's dead. Khrushchev is pushed out, but there's people from Texas that we hope we could get on today, but it happened too quickly. And they said in Dallas, Texas, in 1963, you could have bought any really good rifle. You know, almost on every street corner there's a gun store. Why does he have to mail order an Italian rifle that the Italian soldiers themselves said
didn't like?
They thought wasn't any good.
Yeah.
So he gets the man.
So, those parts are interesting. I think it's for, that's a deeper discussion on that stuff. And but that was kind of my position on that, Peter. And I just wanted to share that because of where Connolly sat. A lot of people don't realize how low his seat was in the presidential limo, And so when you place Connolly down lower, the magic bullet theory had him at the same height, and that would cause problems. But Governor Connolly was actually, I think, 4 or 5 inches lower. And so that caused the trajectory of the bullet to be true.
So what do you do? I love the calls this morning. So what do you do with what this 88-year-old man has now said?
I don't know yet. I want to look at it farther and find some reasoning for it. It's been a long time since I've looked into it, but Kennedy was hated by the CIA. He was hated by organized crime. Some of the things they did, even to what they did to Sammy Davis Jr. I mean, the hatred went on for Jack Kennedy deep, right? And so, but I'll leave you with that. And then the other thing, I just want to do this real quick, Peter, before I got to get off the phone, is I believe at Chappaquiddick, I believe that Ted Kennedy had gotten out of that car after that police officer had stopped them, and she drove that car off the bridge. That's my 2 cents. I'm going to leave that for you, and I got to run into my office.
Well, he got real wet and had to show up a day late. Thanks. Good.
Why did he jump in? Right. Okay. Take care.
Thank you. All right. We go to Bo. Bo, you're on the radio show. Good morning. Peter Boyles on the air. George will be back Monday. It's Friday. Thanks, man.
Hi, Peter.
Hey.
What's the Secret Service agent's name that's writing the book?
Paul Landis.
Paul Landis.
He's now 88.
Yeah, I was 3 years old when Kennedy was assassinated. I remember just vaguely, just my parents talking about it, and I was very interested in it in high school, and I even took a trip to Washington, D.C., went through archives, went through some of the microfilm tapes back in the day. But, this bullet, they say it's pristine.
Yes.
Peter, it's not pristine.
Well,
it's deformed. Part of the bullet, side of the bullet has a bend in it, and some of the lead has been, was lost.
No, if you look at the pictures of it, and I have the single bullet, their theory, it has some rifling on it where it obviously spun, but it's not particularly blunted. It doesn't turn into what we used to call slugs, where it looked like a mushroom or a toadstool where it flattened out. And the better part of this question for me was, what does this say if it's true? What does it say about everything from that point forward? And we know, the 9/11 Commission, we've talked about the Pentagon Papers, we've talked about these position papers that the government, Republicans and Democrats alike, will release, and they're not true.
Well,
that bullet.
Yeah, our history changed, Peter, on that day. But I'd like to just add this point. I'm just an HVAC guy, not a rifleman or marksman expert. Right. But that all those bullets that Lee Harvey Oswald ordered was kind of run-of-the-mill military bullet.
Oh, it was. Sure they were.
They didn't have hollow points or soft cores. It was hardcore copper. It's hard for that type of bullet, and they were not designed to deform. And then I would like to add that I don't think this agent is. He may be forgetful, but that bullet, the bullet was not found near Kennedy. I don't believe this guy put it in his pocket. The bullet was found on Connolly.
No, but he makes it. He makes the case that the Warren Commission says Conley.
On the stretcher, it was found on Connolly's stretcher, not near Kennedy. Well, and it was found by an order.
Again,
a hospital.
Billy, how much we got time here to read this back to him? Here, and again, I've not read the book. I've read excerpts that have appeared, and he's done this lengthy interview. But he said he believes the bullet that he found, and he put it in his pocket. And like I said, I mean, is it so crazy? But he said that and this is from the New York Times, from the article that I read. He said it made him wonder if there was a second shooter in addition to Oswald. In the years since Kennedy's assassination, the National Archive has released troves of documents from the day, as people have speculated whether Oswald acts alone. But there's been no smoking gun in the documents since the assassination to significantly debunk. And now comes this moment where Landis's account is not in line with other facts from that day. So I turn to you, and we know that the commission and the commissioners, they withheld information, they suppressed information. They did it with the Pentagon Papers, the 9/11 Commission report, just the lies that the government tells. Does it make more sense to you as a critical thinker that this is true or false? I turn it back to you.
Well, what you say is true, but I believe the facts of this agent's recount of what happened about the bullet is wrong. A hospital orderly by the name of Daryl Thompson the bullet was found on Conley's stretcher. I believe when they removed it, when he was moved from the trauma room to an operating room, the bullet was found on a stretcher because the bullet fell out of Conley's wrist. And also, I'd like to point out that bullet went through mostly all soft tissue. So it wasn't really mushroomed. I think it just hit a shoulder blade. That was it.
Again, what Landis says is that he picked the bullet up from the limo seat. And he said there was nobody there to secure the scene. And he said it happens quickly, and he talks about it, so he doesn't know what to do with the bullet. So he said he puts it's in his pocket. And he's in the trauma room, he calls it. And he believes that it actually was one of the bullets that hit Kennedy. But again,
it's the bullet that went through his neck. And I would just like to suggest to your readers to pick up a book by Gerald Posner.
Well, Posner, I know. Posner went on to fleece Harper Lee, who wrote Set a Watchman, but To Kill a Mockingbird. He's an interesting character, and there's been 2 or 3 people that have written books that said, "Oh no, believe the commission." I tend not to believe the commission, but I think it's a setup for, like most things, it is what is to come. And
that's true, Peter.
And the Pentagon Papers are a great companion read. And we were talking the other day with Dr. June Depp, and I said, then comes out of all of this comes MK Ultra, and they were actually doing this stuff.
Yeah.
And telling you no. And so I have, at this point in my life, it makes more sense to believe this 88-year-old guy than it does to believe what Arlen Specter put together to make everything fit in 1963, 64. I love your call. You're a very good call, man.
I like you. Thank you.
Thanks, brother. All right, we have a line open. Back tomorrow morning at 9. We're going to talk about Top 40 radio. I'm looking forward to it. 65, it's wet out there. 77 Saturday, 83 on Sunday. 303-696-1971. Morning, everybody. It's a Friday, 7:10 KNUS. I'm Peter Boyles. Good morning. It's 8:53, 7 before the hour. Another line, is open. We go to Mark in Aurora. Mark, if we don't finish up in the hour, I'll bring you back on the other side. Good morning and thank you.
I'll hit quick bullet points, but I worked with Police Chief Curry's wife and I got his private file book. I don't know if that book, I think you can get it on the internet. If you want it, Pete, you can borrow it, but it's really hard to think what those people think. For instance, in the upper room, there was only a palm print of Oswald, but the bullet that was in the chamber had no fingerprints on it.
No, it's such a bizarre story.
He flunked the paraffin test. He did not shoot a rifle, but he was positive for shooting a handgun. He did kill J.D. Tippit.
He shot him.
There's also a picture of him standing in the doorway. Remember how people dressed back then, Peter? They wore suits.
Yeah.
He's got his T-shirt on, standing in the window when the shots are being fired.
Well, let's reset. Let me reset for everybody. So, at the first part of this week, the story breaks that this one-time Secret Service agent, who now is 88 years of age, he has come forward and he says that he was just feet away from Jack Kennedy when Kennedy was assassinated. He was in the car behind. And the magic bullet theory is what holds the whole commission together. The guy's name is Paul Landis. He was with the people in that parade, and he said he found, and I'll just ask you this much of it because I'm going to keep you. You're too good. But he said he found the bullet, put it in his pocket, and took it into Parkland Hospital. What do you do with that?
Well, I believe it because I think you can hear there's a recording that's been enhanced. There's a lot of shots.
Oh, yeah. They come from a motorcycle.
And Dr. Perry was my daughter is a charge nurse in the emergency room. So Dr. Perry was the commanding surgeon, treated over 200 gunshot wounds. He called it an entry wound through the throat.
We talked about that.
But they had to obliterate it. To keep him breathing. That was changed by the Warren Commission. There's no way this was alone. Could somebody have done it from up there, Pete? Yes, but that was never the plan.
But let me remember the umbrella question, and this is what is it. This is the significant document that begins the 60s. Can you stay? I want you to stay. Can you hang on?
Sure.
All right.
Sure.
Would you put him on? If I miss you, come back. Billy, put him on hold, would you please? Because I'll screw it up. All right, he's on hold. We come back on the other side. It's a Friday morning. I'm Peter Boyles, 710 KNUS.
with the crowd, I got just pushed into that room. I was right behind Mrs. Kennedy. When we were entering the room, I stepped behind her to keep her from getting pushed. And the crowd, she stepped to the side, to the left, just inside the doorway when we entered the trauma room. People were pushing and shoving, and I just got shoved right up against the examination table. And it just so happened I was right there next to the president's feet. People were coming in. It was chaos. And at that moment, I thought, well, this is the perfect place to leave the bullet. It should be with the president's body. It's an important piece of evidence. And this was the opportunity to leave it.
The voice of Paul Landis. Good morning, everyone. It's really been an interesting morning for me. I'm Peter Boyles in for George. George is back on Monday. I get to do tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock following Jimmy. We're going to look at Top 40 Radio, which was a wonderful time for this business. This is 710 KNUS, Denver's talk station, Radio Free Denver. Just an interesting morning. 303-696-1971. You heard the weather, but it's 65 the high, but the weekend will be great. So this question this morning, or if there's multiple questions in terms of the umbrella of, these people, are they lying to you? And it goes back, of course, to that terrible day in Dealey Plaza in 63, where President John Kennedy is assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. And that was the conclusion of the Warren Commission. And the calls have been just really brilliant. We have two lines open now, 303-696-1971. So the Secret Service agent, who is now an old man, who was feet away from the former president, his name is Paul Landis. He is one of the agents with Kennedy during the parade in Dallas. And he's come forward to New York Times, but now other people are doing bits and pieces. He has an upcoming book. We've already ordered it. The drop day is October the 10th. The magic bullets theory was put forward by the Warren Commission, a report in the year after Kennedy's assassination that was the point of it was to put people to sleep, to accept that this former Marine, Lee Harvey Oswald, did the shooting. And now the Times has noted, Landis is now 88, and he told the newspaper his theory doesn't match what he saw the theory from the Warren Commission does not match what he saw on that terrible day, the 22nd of November of 1963. And he said he has the bullet. He had this magic bullet, and now even more magical than we knew. But if you tie this in to the Pentagon Papers, to the Bush-Cheney 9/11 Commission reports, to one thing after another, you really come away frightened. And when I started reading this on Tuesday, I thought, wow, I want to bring it to the air. So this caller, and again, the callers have been wonderful. This is Mark, who's kind enough to have stayed. Let me begin with a question, because each hour is a new show. Do you believe that what this former Secret Service agent, Paul Landis, is saying, do you believe it to be true?
Absolutely, because there's virtually, I believe, Peter, the AP photo I told you about, where he's literally standing in the door while Kennedy is clutching his throat, meaning he's being shot from the front. That's what the surgeon said.
If I can interject again, if that isn't true, and so much of what is to come in the 70s and the 80s, they're predicated on you believing the government. And so the Warren,
yes, Gary.
if you know how they put the commission together, Lyndon Johnson, Earl Warren is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. There's people they literally force to go on to the commission. We know Edgar Hoover plays the commission, but it gets worse because they invent the single bullet theory. I mean, it's invented by Arlen Specter, who is the the attorney to the commission.
But I think the great sleight of hand, Pete. Let's take their side of the argument for a minute. Even if Oswald's a lone shooter, who sent him up there to do that?
Oh yeah.
Here's the thing. They want to paint him as a crazy that just went out there. No. That is not what happened. He was the patsy for a group of snipers that went there to kill the president. I think they were set up to do it in Miami, and that got called off. And this, according to mob people, as you know, you've read
Sure.
some of those books.
Sure.
And it's because the Fed was going to be taken away by Kennedy, and he would not escalate the Vietnam War. And
so
Lyndon
many
Johnson
things.
was literally signing those papers on the plane as they were flying back.
You come full circle, and I think that it could be because of where I am in life in terms of time, but this moment was so significant, and maybe because of probably greater than half the population was not alive when this happened, but it set the stage. And in 1964, the commission releases the Warren Commission. Yeah. And it was to quell. I mean, we now know this from other people's work. It was set to calm people down, to quell any questions. And
what's good, Pete, is most people now don't believe it.
No, but that's
the good thing.
But this man,
but the deep state was going on back in '63.
Well, that's the question.
They talk about the deep state now, but the deep state changed governments,
and
that's what's egregious about the Kennedy assassination.
Well, you come back to somebody that I think doesn't get his due, and it's Dwight Eisenhower. And
exactly,
Eisenhower really does see it, and he warns. He gives it another name. He calls it the military-industrial
complex.
That's right. But is that the deep state? Is that the swamp?
I think it's part of it. Like we needed a Ukrainian war, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
We just ran out of things to do.
Yeah. No,
here's the other thing. I think the reason Trump did not release those files, it'd be an interesting question. I wish someone would ask Trump when he's running for president, if he is, that why did you not release those files? You promised that you would. I think, Pete, they're going to find out Oswald was getting a paycheck from the CIA. Well, basically, they're going to prove that this was a government operation.
Remember it was about 18 months ago, and then they called those tapes Oswald in Mexico.
Yeah.
And it's Lee Harvey Oswald's phone calls. And and they suppressed that. The commission, and that stuff was, the CIA had it, the FBI had it. That never went before the commission. He
was not a mastermind. And think of this, Pete, and I'll clear up so you can get some other people in on this. But just go back and play that film and realize the government of the United States of America, with maybe 3 shots, maybe a fourth, changed in a second and a half.
Sure. No,
So to think that was set up by some punk like Oswald, come on. No, not true. It's too clean, Pete.
Well, and here we are. So what I spent most of my week with, and there's a film, and people, I'm sure all of us have seen it many times, and it was called the Zapruder film. And there's this guy named Abraham Zapruder, and he has a Super 8 camera. But nobody has cell phones or anything, but he makes this home movie. And so you got these 2 guys in Dealey Plaza, John Kennedy and John Conley, and they suffered so many wounds, 8 in all. That had originally seemed as if there were more than 2 bullets from the supposed sniper's nest that would have been necessary to explain all of that damage. So this home movie taken by Abraham Zapruder, it shows, and I don't know much about guns, and I'm not attempting to do it, but I've read other people, that there's too little time had elapsed between the apparent shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired. And then they call it reacquiring his target. In other words, the gun kicks, the gun bucks. And then plus he has to throw the bolt. And when you
I'll
finish up, let me finish it. And then
Go
I'll
ahead.
go back to
sorry.
you. No, please. But so he has to reacquire the target and fire again. So the single bullet theory solves all of their problems. And the single nearly whole bullet that you can look at pictures of everywhere on the internet that was later recovered, and this guy said he had it in his pocket, causes all 7 of those wounds sustained by both men. Now, here's my question to you. Do you believe it?
Right. And you and I have both seen where he's shot through the throat, and then we've heard the descriptions of the fact the top of his head was literally shot off.
Well,
so
she's going after
2 definitive shots.
Well, Clint Hill said Mrs. Kennedy goes out on the deck of the Lincoln to get the top of her husband's head and bring it back in the car. And
I don't know who could believe that just one guy set up in a. I really believe what happened is Pete. I think he was the decoy. I think he went up on his lunch break, put his prints in the room, left the gun, and another guy that worked at the book depository that was the real assassin went up there and shot him, and then went back to his desk.
But
that's what I think.
But
happened.
again, what you're doing is you're thinking and you're saying this and saying that. But to the commission, the Warren Commission said they had all this evidence from the experts that this single bullet causes Jack Kennedy's throat wound and all the wounds found in Governor Conley. And now this man comes forward, and it was always called the magic bullet. And this man now comes forward at 88 years of age and says, I had it in my pocket.
Yep.
Who do you believe?
They can do tests on that. But remember, on the ground, at ground level, everybody heard it up on the bridge. I mean, in other words, where the sound of the shots from the front were coming from, that's where they were originally pursuing.
But remember, it's an echo chamber, there's a greater question here that I want to get to you and ask. What does this say about? And there are many good historians who say, we talk about the 60s, and they say the 60s don't begin until 1963 when Jack Kennedy's killed.
Yeah.
And the 60s end with Richard Nixon's resignation. And that's in the 70s. But what does it then say about things like the Iraq War? What does it say about, like you were pointing out, invasions of other countries? And what does it say about U.S. foreign policy? What does it say about U.S. domestic policy? Here is the official government. Lyndon Johnson invents the Warren Commission, takes Earl Warren, puts him on the commission, forces people to be on that commission that hate each other. And they cough this thing out, and it's called the Warren Commission Report. And I've never believed that I've been drawn to reading all about this stuff. And like I said, I was saying, well, I'm out here on a limb all by myself. But then I realized everybody thinks this way. And so give me your conclusions.
Well, I think that, well, first off, you got to say up front, Lyndon Johnson was a despicable guy.
Oh, he's a horrible person.
That's first and foremost.
Yeah.
And so he's the perfect guy to take the job, and he couldn't stand Kennedy.
Well, it was his brother Bob. Jack Kennedy was kind of like he saw Lyndon Johnson as but it was Bobby and Lyndon Johnson that hated each other. Lyndon Johnson and J. Edgar Hoover were very close. J. Edgar Hoover hated Bobby Kennedy, so their mutual hatred of Bobby Kennedy.
Well, the description of Robert Kennedy running on the plane was to go ask Lyndon Johnson if he killed his brother.
Oh,
so
no,
listen. That gives you an idea. That was a real. There was no love lost.
No, when they get to D.C., when they get to D.C. that night, it's.
But it's scary. It's scary in the middle of all the things that were going on in 1963. I have a dream that the Vietnam War was trying to be escalated.
Everything.
I think that Kennedy was, from a moral perspective, infidelity and all that stuff, not a good guy, but I think he was a great American, Pete. And that's a guy that grew up in Dallas and came from a conservative family that wasn't necessarily Democrat. So I think there was a change in government. And I think that, unfortunately, it accentuated the deep state's role in our constitutional republic.
Everything you say, I certainly have thought.
Yeah.
But when this happens, this got little, if any, attention. We'll do everything we can to. I'll get my hands on a book, and then we'll get the guy on a show or shows. But my final question to you is: do you believe this 88-year-old man?
I do.
Yeah.
And I think that that a lot of people were intimidated, Pete. What do they say when it comes between the real story and the what everybody wants to hear? Print what everybody wants to hear. Print the legend.
Mm-hmm. That was John Ford said that.
Yeah, I think they intimidated everybody for so many years to really question.
Anybody that stepped out of line, and there were. That's what happened to. That's why Bobby Kennedy really becomes. And I'm no Bobby Kennedy fan, but he becomes, the bastard stepchild of all of it. And they literally push him away because of what he represents. And you're absolutely right. There's a new sheriff in town. It's Lyndon Johnson. And with Lyndon Johnson, it's the best day of J. Edgar Hoover's life. That his good friend is now the head of the President of the United States. He doesn't have to put up with these Kennedys.
And we sent all of our kids over there to clear the ground for the new shirt factories for America now in 2023.
So horrible. So
Pete, you have a great weekend.
Thanks, man.
And it's something we need to kind of put to bed someday so that people can realize the government rose up and took over.
But there's so much to this moment. And I spent a lot of afternoons, reading on the internet on the couch with my tablet. And in the end, I just close my eyes and think, my God, this is true. And what was done to my country by these people who in 63 and 64 are ginning up or putting together or cobbling together a massive lie that they sold. And Cheney and Bush did it again.
And the sad thing about that, Pete, I still don't know. And I'm not trying to say that I'm stupid. I'm just trying to say, again, you and I both studied with Dr. Lamy. I'm not trying to say that I'm stupid. I'm just trying to say, I still don't know why we fought that war, Vietnam. I still don't know.
Well, it was something that is this something where the military industrial complex wanted to go and wanted to do what Lyndon Johnson saw? Is this part of the domino theory? Is it part of U.S. foreign policy? But what they never understood was no one ever wins those. Not the French. No one. So
no, not a guerrilla warfare. No.
You take care of yourself. Thank you, man. All right. To the wall. Morning, fellas from Nebraska. I do believe this 80-year-old man, there's no reason for him to lie now. This is the interesting part. I hope you get him on. I really will. I really want to hear what he has to say and plug his book so I can get it to read. I'm on your side. 303-696-1971. Good morning, everyone. It's 24 minutes after 9. Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. I'm back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. And what we'll do tomorrow, and this is Louis booked it, man. It's about top 40 radio. And there was probably not a better time for radio than, the golden age, but for top 40, and we all grew up on one form or another of that. What we're talking about, and lines are open, is this man now comes forward, Secret Service agent, and he takes apart the magic bullet theory, or is it the single bullet theory, whatever anybody wants to dub it. And tells this whole different story that really debunks the commission. But if this is true, and this is, I ask you, do you believe this old man? And I'm an old man. 303-696-1971. The single bullet theory is, if you listen to this man, is a lie. Billy, you ready? Want to turn around? All right, 303-693-1971. I'm Peter Boyles. Weather in the city is kind of wet. Stay here. Morning, everybody. 710 KNUS Denver's talk station. Rain in the city on a Friday, September the 15th. I'm Peter Boyles in for George Brauchler. He'll be back Monday, and tops we're going to get is 65 degrees, but the weekend looks just wonderful. I'm back tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, and we're going to spend a lot of the time, and I love old radio stories and talking about radio, top 40 radio. We'll do that. We're talking about the JFK assassination, and this new witness offers new details that really undermine the magic bullet theory, which really means infinitely more than just that. This is Mary. Mary, you're on the show. Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning. Thank you for having this particular program. I had seen something on the internet about Mr. Landis, and I thought, I really would like to read his book because, the whole historical significance anyway, but the street on which I grew up in Dallas was 1 block long, and our next door neighbor, Billy Oliver, who is now deceased, worked in the purse and belt factory downtown on the street on which the motorcade was passing. A number of the staff got permission to go down and watch the motorcade. And I think that Mr. Zapruder, I believe that Billy said that Mr. Zapruder owned the purse and belt factory.
I think so too.
Which he worked.
No, I think that's what Abraham Zapruder did. He owned a small manufacturing firm in Dallas. Yes, I think you're probably right.
And so when she was on the street, she always said to us afterwards, the shots came from the grassy knoll.
Yeah,
That's where she heard them coming.
All the stories, yeah.
And then when they were going back up in the freight elevator, Mr. Zapruder was in the elevator with them. And she said, I never saw a person with a face as red as his in my whole life. She was never interviewed by anyone.
No.
Then later, on the other end of our street, Jim Martin, who was the manager of the Dallas Hilton Hotel downtown, secretly brought Marina Oswald and the children to be in their home. My brother and the Martins' 2 boys were about the same age at that time. And on that street, there were several young boys, and they would all be together in the street playing football or baseball or whatever the season was. But all of a sudden, the word was that they could not go into the Martins' house. And my mother was teaching school at the time, and when she would leave in the morning to go to school, she said, I would see this car pull up in front of the Martins. 2 men in suits would get out. And she said, I thought, Wanda must have her brothers here looking for work. She never thought anything about it. I was away from home in college, and I called home, and there was a click on the phone. And I said to my dad, what is that clicking on your phone? Yeah. And he said, our lines are tapped. Marina Oswald is living in the Martins' house.
No, listen, it must have been so across the country. And you remember it because obviously you lived it, how insane it was because the next day, then Jack Ruby gets killed. And, that's a whole different story. Jack Ruby connected to the Chicago mob and, Jack Ruby this, Jack Ruby that. And he kills this presidential assassin. And it just cuts all the strings to whatever's going to be the truth. So let me ask you this question. Here's this 88-year-old former Secret Service agent that now steps forward and says that it's not true. Do you tend to believe him or think that he's making it up?
Oh, I believe him, absolutely.
See? Yeah, see?
I think he's wise to say, before I go from this earth, before anything begins to happen to my mind, I need to tell the truth.
And he was not called. And here, this is again, you ask questions that are not answerable, but he's 88 now, and he tells this newspaper the theory that it doesn't match what he saw. And he said, what he's saying is what the Warren Commission or someone already told me, the deep state, says doesn't match what he eyewitnessed. And he's in the car behind the Kennedy's Lincoln, where they called it halfback. I didn't know that's why I read him. And he said, and let me read in his quotes. He said, all of this is going on quickly. And he says to himself, Paul, you got to make a decision. And I grabbed it. And he said he believes that the bullet that he found, and he said the Times reports him, and he said that he said he heard the shots a different way, in addition to the Oswald stuff. And he goes on, he said, in the years since Kennedy's assassination, and he gets down to being an old guy, and he wants the truth, quote, the truth out. And
yes.
Yeah, no, but it means, when I started reading this, the first part of the week, to, knowing I was going to go to George's show, this means so much more than just that. And maybe I'm not getting that across in the right manner. But what stunned me was everything that is to come after that moment, and everything that happens in everybody's lives since that moment, and all the sadness that occurs inside this country, and what this country causes abroad, and does it again under Bush and Cheney, and how or why. And that's the part that legitimately, Mary, just has me against the wall. I'd go, if this, and I never believed it anyhow, but once again, the guy you were talking about, Zapruder, they would have just assumed that the Zapruder film never existed, because there are people that are, mathematically inclined to time it out. And Zapruder's film shows that there's too little time had elapsed between the shots that hit both men in the back for Oswald to have fired, and they call it reacquiring the target and firing again. So Arlen Specter's the attorney to the Warren Commission. He makes up the single bullet theory that neatly solves both problems. Indeed. But what does it mean in terms of what is to come? The rest of the 60s, into the 70s, the Bush-Cheney years. I mean, this stuff it's all connected. And when Specter comes up with this idea, you ask yourself, gee, did Specter come up with this on his own, or did somebody feed Specter this theory, this idea, to put it over? And now here's this old guy who said he was just feet away from Jack Kennedy when he was assassinated, is raising these new questions about the so-called magic bullet. His name's Paul Landis. And Mark's ordered his book, and his version of the assassination. You can go to the New York Times and read it. And he goes, you can, New York Times website, you got to pay to get on. But he said, I'll read this again. After decades of trying to erase the day from his memory, he said that if his recollections are correct, the so-called magic bullet theory needs to be debunked. What do you do? What do you do with that? Huh?
And the other point that you were bringing out before was that Kennedy was not in favor of beginning U.S. involvement in Vietnam, but Johnson signs the order on the airplane going back to Washington.
But he's doing all kinds of stuff. He actually hides. And the Air Force colonel that flew Air Force One, if his stories are true, Lyndon Johnson was hiding on the airplane and was saying they're going to kill us all. And he's a full colonel, and he is alleged to have slapped Lyndon Johnson across the face to snap him out of it. He said, "You're now the president of the United States." Now, I've read that a couple different places. Don't, and again, in these moments, what's true, what's not true, but you would think something like that being claimed if it weren't true. And I tend to believe that that's true, that Lyndon Johnson's not a nice man by any stretch of the imagination. And so I love your call. Mary, thank you so much.
Well, I'm so glad to hear you on the radio.
You're kind. Well, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. I'll read this to the wall. The fact that the government has yet to release all the information on this crime means there are bad things in there, and they don't make the government look good. Consider today's world. They don't need any additional bad trash. No, that's well said. The 1973 movie Executive Action is interesting. I've seen the film. Take on the Kennedy assassination. Billy, how's our time? All right, we'll break. 7:10 KNUS on a Friday. And others are rocking. Morning, I'm Peter Boyles for George Brauchler, and I'll be back here tomorrow following Jimmy at 9 o'clock. We'll talk about the golden days of Top 40 radio. 710 KNUS, and again, thanks to the MC1 Foundation and Jay Lopez for being on the show. The weather, look at it, it's wet outside, it's colder, and it's rainy and 65. But tomorrow will be Murder Incorporated. It's 77 and 83 and all kinds of really, really good weather. Let me read this to you, and then we'll go and take some final moments on it. Sirhan was put under hypnosis. That's the book called RFK Must Die, and revealed some interesting things. Number one, the radio man, possibly how he was given instructions while he slept. 2, his head injury. 3, the blonde in the kitchen who pinched Sirhan very hard, triggering him into action. The girl in the polka dot dress is that theory, what it's called. Yeah, there's a book entitled RFK Must Die, and I read it in undergrad. But Sirhan's diary, and then we'll go to the phones, in very tiny little letters, page after page after page after page, as tiny as he could write, Sirhan writes, RFK must die. And people said, well, he was hypnotized. And that was his cue. We go to Gary coming up on time. Gary, you're on a radio show. Good morning.
Good morning, Peter.
Hey,
There's all these theories and guesses and things like that. A lot of them aren't backed by facts. But here's my theory on this bullet that this guy found. And basically, I think what it is, it's a hook to get people to buy his book. And I'm guessing it's probably a ghostwriter who's probably younger than him, who actually wrote the book and created this theory. And it's just a hook to cash in. It's all about the money.
A book like this isn't going to make a ton of money.
Well, they're hoping it will.
Well, yeah. I mean, everything you say is legit. Taking nothing away from any of your questions, because these are moments in time that don't have a negative or positive answer. They're what does the other things that swirl around this moment tell you? And it isn't like this is a standalone moment. To me, where the Warren Commission report's been taken apart so many different times, we know so many bad things about the commission report. What's one more thing? And the guy clearly was an agent. He clearly was in the car behind them. And yet he witnesses the assassination, yet is never called before the commission itself. And the single bullet theory is really it holds all of it together. That if you actually read the history of it and read the commission, that this was an invented theory to solve the problems that the commission faces. And that the single bullet, and now this man says, as an old guy close to it, the coming of a time in his life, and he goes, look, I had the bullet. Now, if you look at all the other parts of this moment and all the other things that follow, i.e. the Pentagon Papers, Richard Nixon's plumbers, the plan to end the war, Watergate, everything that comes with these things. Why would I think, Gary, and why would you think, oh, this is a lie? Well, I tend to say, no, it's just another example of the suppressed truth.
Yeah, I guess if I had an opportunity to interview this 80-year-old man,
88, easy,
80, which is still relatively young, I would ask him one question: who wrote the book, and who will be financially rewarded?
But having a ghost is no big deal. 99% of first-person books they have ghosts. The
only reason I bring that up is because someone who's 88 years old might be telling the truth if he was just telling the truth.
Yeah.
But I think the reason why I bring up the ghostwriter is there's someone other than him that's going to benefit financially.
Well, sure, of course. But anytime you see a book and it has something as told to, or, those kinds of, but that having a ghostwriter is by no stretch of the imagination original or new. What floored me when I saw this, I think I saw it Tuesday for the first time, was it adds into things that I have not believed and have made me really angry at my government, not my country, but at this government or a series of governments that have pulled these stunts again and again and again. This is really, the magic bullet is like WMDs. It's like we see this again, we see it again and again and again. And you, of all people, over the years calling the radio show, you know that these people have lied to you consistently. Who are these people?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You're right. And you know what I was thinking also, it's been 60 years. We're talking about something that happened 60 years ago. And I'm thinking, in 1964, we weren't talking about things that happened in 1904.
No. Well, I don't know.
Anyway.
I don't know. I mean, but it's really interesting. I'm really pulled into the Little Bighorn and Custer and everything. And when the impact of George Custer was probably the equivalent of 9/11. I mean, for the government of Grant and for the people of the United States, and that was the end of the free roaming Plains Indians. They were going to die after that, or surrender, or quit. I don't know. I mean, I get lost in it, but very good call, man. Well thought out. Billy, we have one more here. Do we have time, or no? That's it. Thank you, and thanks. And George will be back here, and I'm here tomorrow morning. Rise and shine, and we're talking about tomorrow Top 40 radio, and that was the time of AM radio was king. Top 40 radio was the king of all of that, and Top 40 radio really comes out of when the golden age of radio was really is really the 30s and 40s. By the 1950s, television has kicked everybody out of the way. What are we going to do with these signals? The same thing. This is why talk radio arises. Music radio goes to FM. It sounds better on FM, leaving enormous voids. What are you going to do? And somebody said, aha, talk radio. And so when all the big bands and everything go away and the record shows begin, and the guys like Storr and those guys that really understood radio and understood music, they invent Top 40. We'll talk about that tomorrow morning at 9. This has been an interesting morning. I appreciate some brilliant input, good calls, good text messaging. Take care of yourselves, you guys. Stefan is this afternoon. I'll see you tomorrow at 9. Thank you, Billy Thorpe. See ya.